City Recorder Krieger, please call roll.
Councillor Wolf. Councillor Wolf. I can see she's remote. Council President Hu.
Here.
Mayor Lube.
Here.
Youth Councillor Manini.
Here.
Councillor Shaw.
Here.
Councillor Schlack.
Here.
Thank you. If everyone will please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Does the City Council or city teammates have any non-agenda items this evening?
None from us, Mayor. Thank you.
I have a non-agenda item to add just to the end of the meeting. So after our, so we'll add it to item number 7. A couple of weeks ago, you received an email from City Manager Reimer sort of talking about our boards and committees, how we had been asking, I think, for a recommendation for a revamp on our boards and committees, which ones still made sense, potentially which ones to add. And that was one of the things, given some of the changes with the city, that I think was put off to the side. But we were talking about, and I think since perhaps even the beginning of last year, at least the beginning of this year, about a houselessness committee or task force and a climate committee or task force. And so I feel strongly that perhaps not waiting until the entire thing can be reviewed. Those are two issues that are pretty prominent to Tigard, that we discuss as a council whether or not we want to direct the city team to look into it. So thinking about those sorts of things and task force versus committee and all that stuff. So I'd like to just have a brief conversation at the end of the agenda about that. Sound good? Okay. Okay. Moving on, we have public comment. If you'd like to call in, please do so now to get into the queue. The phone number is 503-966-4101. And anyone who wants to make a general comment in person, there is a sign-up sheet at the back of the room. And we have City Manager Reimer to provide follow-up to previous public comment.
Thank you again, Mayor, and members of the community, council, and my teammates. At the July 23rd meeting, we had 17 written public comments. 16 were about safe parking. 1 was about camping at the library. We also had 1 call-in about the time, place, manner ordinance, and we had 1 person comment about safe parking. All of these received a follow-up response by our Strategic Initiatives Manager, Kim Azell, during that week.
Thank you. We now have the Tigard Chamber Board of Directors Chair, Tom Engel, to give us a Tigard Area Chamber of Commerce update.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for having me again. You should have the report in front of you. Just a few things I wanted to highlight. Our Leadership Tigard class of 2025 is rapidly filling up, and I do like the suggestion here. If there are any council members or prospective community members who are considering running for office, that are interested, they should sign up as soon as they have an opportunity. There's new information online, a new pamphlet available. It is a great way to get a deep dive into what's going on in our city, and it's just a great experience. So if you're interested in registering, please go to the website under Leadership Tiger to secure your spot. A reminder that our Government Affairs and Public Policy Committee has gone into an all online mode, and we are currently running the endorsement process for candidates. Applications are now closed. Probably the big highlight next that I want to bring out our State of Business, Building and Sustaining a Thriving Workforce. It's presented by Umpqua Bank, held September 25th, 9 a.m. to 1:30 at Broadway Rose. This is a longer format, going to have booths there, speakers, the state and WorkSource as well, Q&A. This is going to be a little bit different. I think it's really going to be a good improvement. So encourage you to come by, support local businesses, see what you have to learn, hear some perspectives. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And of course, door prizes and swag don't hurt. That's pretty fun. In terms of promoting the community, the farmers market, despite what a prior president has said, broccoli is cool, and I encourage you to go by and participate in the vegetable procurement process for your household. Good Morning Tigard, we're getting up to 50 people at any given time, 50 plus coming there. Please come by as you have time to support local business. In terms of key dates, Downtown Tigard ribbon cutting on Main Street on the 22nd. After hours, hosted by Harvest Moves Sangria Bar, August 27th. I have to get that on the calendar. If you have not been there, it is amazing. You really need to swing by. If not then, some other time. Community Warehouse ribbon cutting, September 14th. Member orientation. It's always fun to kind of sit in on those if you have a moment. You've got new faces, new perspectives. They're trying to get oriented and just sort of learn what's it like to be in a chamber, let alone how to engage the community. It's just a fun experience. And again, the State of Business held September 25th. And we would like to always highlight, follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook for the most up-to-date information. Some people have sworn off social media, which I totally get. And between newsletters and other resources, social media is probably one of the best ways just to know what's going on in the Tigard community from the business perspective. I occasionally get questions from business owners who are wanting to know what's going on, and the first thing we do is say, follow us on social media, get on the newsletter. We're pretty good about keeping you informed about the goings on in the community. And with that, I will pause for questions, if any.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. Are there any questions for the chamber this evening? Okay, thank you so much. Next on the agenda, we have the police chief update. Huh?
No,
Hmm?
Maureen had waved.
Maureen, Councilor Wolf, did you have a question?
Oh, Mayor, I was just going to ditto Tom's comment about Leadership Tigard. I did it as a candidate 2 years ago and was a tremendous opportunity to dive in and learn about the city going through that process. So I just wanted to double Tom's plug for that as a great learning opportunity if you are a candidate for the city. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Great. And now we have Chief McDonald for the Tigard Police update. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I wanted to start the dashboard with a little bit of a different approach. You all received the dashboard, so if you have questions about that, I'd be happy to answer those. But I wanted to give you an update on the adjustments to the time, place, and manner ordinance that took effect back on the 29th. And just to give you a little bit of insight into some of what we've been able to see out in the community with that. So beginning the morning after council approved the ordinance change last month, we began the messaging effort with those that would be most directly impacted by the change in the ordinance. And understandably, we had some folks that were frustrated and didn't understand, but we took the opportunity to educate, talk to them about that, and then let them know what places were not available for camping, and then let them know that there was, the adjustment that was being allowed where there's a space over in front of Public Works. On the morning of the 29th, we went out and had several folks that did pack up their belongings and move along, and it was a little bit of a process to get the area by the library picked up and made back to presentable, as many would say, but that was done successfully by late in the day on the 29th. And since then, we have a handful of folks that are camping out in front of Public Works each night, and largely are packed up and moving along by 9 a.m. And our officers are going and spending time just about every day going over, making sure that we're trying to connect folks to resources and make sure that we're getting those folks so that they're comfortable and used to the regulation of having all of their belongings picked up and moved along by 9 a.m. So we haven't had anybody that's needed to be given an exclusion for violating time, place, and manner at this point after the changes. So we've given some gentle reminders or warnings for some of the folks that maybe were dragging their feet a little bit, but for the most part, people understand. They're clear on what the expectation is now, and we are working with some of the service providers to try and get folks connected to an appropriate level of service for those that are living outside. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on that effort.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it the same group of folks that tends to be coming back every evening? Is it a different group of individuals?
Largely, we're seeing the same people. It's interesting because we do see that population change. At least a few people pretty regularly, but there is typically the same handful of folks that we see every day, and many of them actually came from the space over at the library.
Thank you. Additional questions? Yeah, Councilor Shaw.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate the update. Do you then see that they go on to places such as Just Compassion to receive services, or are they getting the need and then the care that that's required for them?
Yeah, it really depends on the individual. Just Compassion is one of the primary service providers that we're using. Another good example is like veterans services. So we've been able to connect some of our houseless folks that are veterans to veteran services, because there are some that are specific to those that have served in the military. And so trying to connect people to those correct services is one of the things that we really try and do. So, trying to find those nuances is where that's where we're really trying to focus, is if there's something that is more appropriate for one individual versus another, we're really trying to decide what those are. And I've got to give credit to our officers that are out there doing it every day, because they're really learning and understanding the population and trying to connect them to the appropriate level of services so that they can get into that stable environment, stable housing, and try and get them off the street. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, I think, for all of us, is to get those that are houseless off the street. And I can't say enough about the work that our officers are doing to do that. So we really put that as the high priority, is trying to make sure that we connect people with those appropriate services.
Youth Councilor Mainini?
I was just curious. You said that the officers connect them with resources. Is that done through like a conversation or like flyers? And for those who may like reject going to those resources, is there a reason or like a common obstacle between them, or?
It depends on the individual, obviously. So the resources come in a variety of different ways. Oftentimes it's the officer taking the name of the person that is in need of services to the service provider and saying, this is where you can find this person, this is what time of day you can find them, and then the service provider coming to that person. We find that with a lot of times with this population, that just handing them a flyer is not effective, right? So actually getting them face to face with a service provider is really what often is needed in order to make that work. There are a lot of people that just flat refuse services. And in that case, then we respect that, right? That's their right. But we also keep an eye on them and try and make sure that they're getting at least some level of help or care so that they're not becoming more at risk than what they currently are. So yes, people do deny connection to services routinely. And so we try and take that, that compassionate approach, but yet make them understand, well, here's the rules, and the expectation is that you're abiding by those rules. So it is complex, and sometimes there's things like substance abuse and mental health challenges that interfere with those. And we, even though they refuse services, we still try to maybe connect a service provider with those individuals, because sometimes the barrier is the police or the uniform. And so we recognize that, and so trying to get them connected to people that maybe aren't having that isn't as much of a barrier, that's one of the things we do.
Any additional questions? No.
The other thing I wanted to let everyone know, and Council President Hu, thank you for being there this morning. We were able to do some promotions today here in Town Hall because I got promoted to the chief's spot, so we had to fill the commander position, had to fill a lieutenant position because that person got promoted, and then fill a sergeant's position. So we did that today. And it's exciting. I'll let you know who that is. So Brad Sitton was promoted to commander, and Brad has been with the police department since 2006. Actually, he started as a reserve in 2003, so he's been around for quite some time. Lieutenant Odom started in 2001, and he became a sergeant in 2016, and he's our newest lieutenant. And then Sergeant Tyler Sanford, this is pretty cool. He started in 2010 as a cadet and came out of our cadet program. He was the first officer that we hired that came out of the cadet program. And so now he's been promoted to sergeant. So that's pretty neat. He's local from Tigard, and only ever wanted to work for the Tigard Police Department. Started as a cadet, and then now he's been promoted to sergeant. So some good, exciting things there. And then we actually hired a new officer. He started yesterday. Hunter Scott is his name. He's from the local area, actually West Lynn, and he's very excited to get going. He's got a big smile on his face right now from ear to ear. So some good new exciting movement in the police department this week. Are there any questions that I might be able to answer off the dashboard or anything else?
I just wanted to give some feedback. I was talking with somebody at my day job, and she happened to be at Washington Square. I think it was this weekend, right?
Yes.
When there was an incident and nobody knew what it was. And she, of course, was terrified, as everybody else was. But she just gave me so many kudos to let me know how incredible the police response was. She said you could tell they were flying in from everywhere, but they were so incredibly careful because there was so much chaos. They weren't reckless. Standing in the parking lots, she saw several officers with their arms around people, consoling them because of the trauma that they had just gone through. And so really, I just wanted to publicly commend the police department just on the response and the way that it was handled and communicated from somebody who was there and gave me that feedback, that it was just really well handled and luckily not a true, I think, horrific crisis situation, but it was certainly handled that way on the outset, and the trauma that people endured was real. The terror for having to run out of Washington Square. So I wanted to forward that along.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll pass it along to the supervisor and the officers that were working. Yes, I mean, our training works, right? The officers responded in the way that we expect them to. It came out as what could have been a very horrific incident, and we quickly identified that was not the case at all. But nonetheless, people were traumatized by the incident. And then when you get that opportunity to switch from responder mode into that compassionate, consoling mode, which we often end up in, I'm glad to hear that somebody recognized that, because that's a compassion piece of law enforcement that often doesn't get seen, is that piece of the human side of it, where we actually get to let people know, hey, it's okay. We understand the impact and the trauma that this is, but everything's okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I will share that with them.
Please do. Council President Hu?
Thank you, Mayor Loop. Yeah, so I read last week the state approved the Washington County's deflection program. So would you please give us a brief update on what the program will be like?
Sure.
At least currently, I heard you got one chance in a year in 6 months period, and how. And then after that, how we will keep monitoring the progress of how the county is doing and stuff like that. Just an overview of that. So
Sure. Yeah, so the deflection program is the result of the reforms from ballot measure 110 that the legislature came up with in the most recent short session. Begins September 1st. And what will happen in Washington County is an officer will encounter someone on the street that has possession of a controlled substance under the rewrite of the law. They can issue a citation for that, and then they'll also provide instruction for the deflection program, or potentially have a counselor or navigator. What is the name that we're giving it in Washington County? Anyway, a person, a peer, an individual who has experienced addiction that could actually respond to the scene where the officer is working with that individual. Once that person arrives, the officer leaves, and then we really don't know what happens after that. The deflection program does, but law enforcement doesn't. That's where the piece with law enforcement ends, and I think that's the critical component of it there. The part that law enforcement has is that initial citation and then trying to get the person into the deflection program. So then deflection will give people the opportunity to enter into some level of treatment, whatever's appropriate for them. And that's going to be whatever the service providers and the experts in that area determine based on the individual. So when they say a one strike and you're out program, it might be a little unfair to say that, because what we all recognize that often, in fact, most of the time, it takes multiple encounters with someone that's addicted in order for them to get entered into services. The key piece to this is that they will be given a court date, and if they enter the deflection program, the court date goes away. The criminal side of it just effectively gets dismissed and disappears. Where it's basically like the one strike thing, is if I agree to enter, but then I don't, then the court case can move forward, because then what it does is it gives the court some leverage to be able to say, well, you agreed to do this, but then you didn't, or you failed to appear in court when you were supposed to, or you failed to follow through with the provisions. The court can then have some level of accountability to try and get that person into some level of treatment. So I think it's important for us to try and balance that piece. And the district attorney, last week when we were having a meeting about this, he said, we recognize that this is going to need to be adjusted and tweaked, and probably very soon after they get it started. They're moving forward with what we feel is going to be a solid plan for Washington County, and it is quite different than other counties in the state. And in fact, the fact that Washington County's got approved is actually quite encouraging, because Clackamas counties did not. And so I think that the state recognizes that Washington County's unique approach to it is going to have that piece of trying to connect people to addiction services rather than sending them through the criminal justice system. So I think that's the critical difference that was recognized by the state, that the real focus is trying to get people into those addiction services and not into the criminal justice system. And that's the intent of the law, the rewrite of the law anyway. So I feel like by the time the legislative session comes around after the first of the year, we'll have a little bit better idea of how this is working, and we'll be able to have some informed conversations with our legislature about how this is proceeding forward. So I am very encouraged by what Washington County is doing, and another thing that's really encouraging is the fact that the impact for the officers is really very minimal. And it's super transparent for the people that are impacted that we're going to be issuing the citations to. And that's exactly what we're looking for, is so that the interaction they have with the officer, once that's done, it moves to the deflection program and it moves to those experts that work with the addiction services. That's the intention of the law, and that's how it's going to work in Washington County.
Thank you. And if I remember correctly, our model is based on a successful model for another county, but maybe not quite as a high gold standard as you, but at least we're at the silver ish or whatever. I don't want to assign arbitrary color, but we are based on, our model is based on a pretty successful model so far, right?
Yes, you're correct. Marion County has a very successful model that existed before ballot measure 110 came into play. So the idea is to have some similarities to what Marion County has. Their program has just been around for so long and it's so robust that it's really difficult to just do that immediately ground level. So I think that as it begins to grow in Washington County, we figure out what works best for this county, we'll adapt to that and put into place what works best for here. And I think it'll be informative over the next several months of what adjustments we'll need to make that'll work best for here. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any additional questions as we grill the chief? Councillor Shaw?
Not a question, but just a huge thanks to you and the police department coming out last week for the National Nights Out, and our community members for the 28 parties that we got to go to meet with both dogs, cats, children, adults. And just want to thank the mayor and my fellow councilors for being there as well, and look forward to hopefully having many more next year. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks to all of you for being there too. It was so much fun. One of our favorite events of the year for sure.
It is. It's the best. Yeah, Councillor Stack.
Thank you, Mayor Lube. I'd like to echo the thoughts of Councillor Shaw regarding National Night Out. And as a new councillor, we've had a couple of weeks since our last meeting, and as part of my onboarding to being a council member, I've been able to be part of an officer ride-along with Officer Byerly. I was part of National Night Out, and then I also had a tour that was focused on community development in downtown, but that was an opportunity to learn more about our community-focused police officers, and I've found all of these opportunities to be really informative to me as a new counselor, and I think to a lot of community members should they have those opportunities to interact with our police department. So I just really want to express appreciation and gratitude to you, Chief, and to the police department more broadly for those opportunities over the last few weeks.
Absolutely. And I'll go ahead and plug our open house that's coming up on September 21st. That's a great opportunity, like you were talking about, to get the community involved in seeing their police department and seeing some of the equipment and the training that we do. So September 21st, mark your calendar, and I'll give it a plug again next month too.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Mayor.
For written public comments, we had 15 total. One was on their sewer bill and 14 were on safe lots. For in-person public comment, we have one person signed up, and that's John Goodhouse. Please come on up, and you'll just want to turn the microphone on. Welcome.
Good to be on this side once. Thank you, Mayor, councilors, and city staff. John Goodhouse. The topic I'm going to discuss or I want to go over is events in public spaces, in events and festivals. So as many might know, I own Beach at Delhi, and with Florian McKinney Productions, we put on Tiger Music Festival for the last 2 years in 2022 and 23. We worked on trying to do it in 24. Florian McKinney Productions worked with the city, tried to locate a location again. Through all the different talks and discussion, we had a small part of Tiger Street and Rotary Plaza for the option, but we also asked in emails about using Universal Plaza for vendors or using Cook Park, Dirksen Park, or other places, and got told no for all those locations. The reason why I wanted to bring this topic up was since then, right around about the same time, Universal Plaza, the city put on a night market. Also, the city's been putting on concerts in Cook Park. So my question would be for the council and for the city would be are these public spaces only going to be used for city events, or what's the policy on it? Is this also going to be open to private events? And it's something that if it's only for city-ran events, that'd be fine, but it needs to be stated out there. Or if it's something that's open, what's the process? Because there's many other organizations out there that I know, or private entities that would love to have events in Universal Plaza, would love to have events in our parks. Florida New Productions goes to conferences that do festivals. It's kind of known as Tigard to kind of stay away because Tigard shuns them away or says no. Through our process, we found out there's a lot of entities that do want to have festivals and events in the city, but are told no. So I would ask the city and the city council to figure out what your policy is on having events and festivals, and if it's allowed, or if the city is going to only be the ones that's going to do it. I know I have time, and there's a lot to talk about, but I'd love to meet with anyone and talk a lot more detail of how the process went. But we had a great event. There were 7,000 people that attended both years. When we didn't have this year, we've had so many people reach out to us and say, why did this event not happen? We loved it. We even had people showing up downtown looking for the event this year. And so my time is up, but please reach out to me. I'd love to hear what the city's policy is on events in public places.
Thank you, Mr. Goodhouse. Mr. Thornburg, do we have any phone callers in the queue or anyone wishing to comment by video today?
There's one phone call in and no video calls.
Okay, please go ahead and let the phone caller in. Hello, welcome to Tigard City Council. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, this is Sean Murphy in Tigard here. I would like to take a moment to thank the City Council for a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to thank them for their willingness to pilot the safe parking pilot program on the city property. As a Tigard resident, it really shows that the city is invested in a partnership with the residents, so thank you for that. And then also for sending out the Good Neighbor Agreement for safe parking that was actually sent out earlier today. Again, I appreciate that the council's taking a proactive approach to kind of laying out some of the parameters for this program. I'd like to restate a point that I've made previously, and that I think it's really important that adequate data are gathered and metrics are reported by the city to gauge the actual success of this and really any other program that's established to pursue the stated council goal of reducing the homeless population in Tigard. I'd like to point out that the data need to include things like the volume of police calls and not necessarily police reports, the call type before and after the program implementation, for the program site property and a 1-block radius surrounding that property. It'd be good to know the point-in-time counts for that site property and that same 1-block radius, and then also any measurable reduction or increase in the Tigard homeless population using city-specific point-in-time estimates or by-name list data. And then finally, really any success data, targets and reports that illustrate specifically how many people are moving into stable housing versus moving laterally into other shelter programs. These data really should be acquired and actively measured before any program implementation begins at a selected site. And then furthermore, these data should be tied directly to any city funding. If the programs fail to show objective and measurable success metrics, the city should consider to not continue funding them and instead allocate those dollars to other solutions which may offer a greater degree of success. And that's all I have. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Next item on our agenda is the city manager report.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and good evening again, Mayor, Council, community members, and my teammates. I want to start by just saying congratulations and thank you to our most recent employees of the month, Jessica Love and Amber Bell, both well-deserved of it. I think you probably know both of them. They live our core values, demonstrate a community promise in the 5 E's, and so just want to say congratulations to both of them. Chief, thanks for introducing our new teammates. I also want to say congrats to each of them again, to our commander, lieutenant, and sergeant. And I also want to say thanks to the many teammates that have been involved in our time, place, manner. It really started with our city attorney, our strategic initiatives manager, our chief, talking through this policy options with all of you and all of you providing that support. And then as importantly, as we implemented, and you heard some of the experience we have, just a real thanks again to our police department, and also our facilities team. Our facilities team is also there, making sure that our grounds are well kept and supporting our community members as well. So thanks to both of them. If you can believe it, our library is going to celebrate our 20th birthday. So that'll be next week on Tuesday, August 20th from 4:30 to 7. We'll kick off at 4:30 with the music for dancing, laughing, and just all around fun. Cake will be served at 5:30, and then we'll have an outdoor musical performance at 6 o'clock. And so hopefully some of you and many members of our community can come and celebrate what I'd say is one of our great public facilities in this community, and where many, many people utilize it day in and day out. And finally, we had 886 kids and grown-ups attend our library story time during the month of July. So just as we do, it seems like every report just showing ways how our team is working directly with our community to serve them and just allow them to live in a vibrant community that really supports everyone. And with that, that concludes my remarks. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions on the report or comments? Yeah, Council President Hu.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to follow up on the library story time, because during the National Night Out, I was surprised at the River Terrace neighborhood. I was able to speak with several families in Chinese, and they were surprised, and they were asking me what option they have for Chinese families, and I was able to tell them we have story time in Chinese, and so they were very happy about that. So thanks to library staff and teammates for being so inclusive to the new community. So thank you.
Thank you, Council President.
That's really cool. Next, we have the consent agenda, which is used for routine items, including minutes and approval of contracts or intergovernmental agreements. Information on each item is available on the city's website in the packet for this meeting. Items may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Council members may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Tonight on the consent agenda, we have the Cook Park boarding dock replacement, Southwest Fruing Court improvements, street striping services, annual and on-call work, and prosecutorial attorney services. Are there any questions or comments or a motion on the consent agenda? Yep, Council President Hu?
Thanks again, Mayor. Just a couple of quick comments on the Fruing Street improvement. I say this before, but I want to say it again. I really appreciate city grouping together major water line work and road improvement work together to save us taxpayer money. So I really appreciate that. And my understanding is that, based on my conversation with city managers, that city teammates been making significant progress at evaluating our public comment protocol. So for communicating, street improvement changes or boil water notice. So I just want to highlight those two things and really express my appreciation. So with that, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
Sorry, it wasn't discussion. I'm just going to recognize Parks and Recreation for the great work they've done on the Cook Park dock replacement, and particularly with the Marine Board and receiving a grant. So just a shout out. I know we have project engineer Peck here, but just want to recognize the great work. And last night we actually got to take a tour on the Tualatin River as the Parks and Recreation Committee, and it was really informative. So just want to say thank you.
Any additional comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is adopted by unanimous vote of the council. Next item is a legislative public hearing for a court of record, and I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify by phone or video or in person, please do so. There's a sign-up sheet at the back of the room, or you can call 503-966-4101. And we have Court Supervisor Fenton and Municipal Judge Oberdorfer to present. Welcome. Good evening.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Holly's got this one. Start doing it right? Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. My name is Holly Fenton. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Court Operations Supervisor for the Tigard Municipal Court. I am here tonight with the Honorable Judge Emily Oberdorfer. Council had requested exploring the possibility of becoming a court of record. City teammates explored the benefits, the costs, and considerations to this change. There was also consultation with teammates in IT, finance, police, and the city prosecutor, yielding broad support with no concerns. The Tigard Municipal Court supports transparency in the judicial system. We are here tonight to ask the council to pass an ordinance that would grant the authority required under ORS 221.342 for the Tigard Municipal Court to become a court of record, which will allow greater access to court proceedings, increase the accountability of all courtroom participants, allow a greater level of transparency, and the ability for cases on appeal to be heard at the Oregon Court of Appeals instead of a new trial in the circuit court. Judge, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Not a thing. Any questions?
Any questions?
We will first move on to written comments. We didn't receive any by the designated time. Mr. Thornburg, are there any callers in the queue or anyone wishing to testify by video today?
Not at this time.
Okay, and we don't have anyone signed up in person, so there's nothing to respond to. So I will close the public hearing, and now we have council consideration for any questions or comments regarding this. Yeah, Councilor Schlack.
2 questions. So the fiscal impact of this change, it's going to cost a little over $5,000 annually. I'm curious what that cost is, because I read that, and normally I'm used to seeing much higher amounts when agenda items pop up. So I'm just curious what that $5,000
It's the software, I
is.
believe.
That's correct.
It's the software for the recording.
Software. Okay, very cool. And then I'm just curious, we talked, you all talked a little bit about what this change will allow the city to do. Would you be able to provide just a quick statement of what the current situation is, though, for not being a court of record? Because
Right.
as someone I did my research, I'm trying to find what a court of record is specifically versus not a court of record, and ORS doesn't quite provide a clear definition, so I was hoping for community benefit you could explain
Well, we
that.
don't handle a lot of appeals, but one of the big things is that appeals, instead of getting a whole brand new trial at the circuit court, it would go to the Oregon Court of Appeals to determine if our decision was correct. And then the bigger thing, I believe, is this transparency in the courtroom. So right now, nothing's recorded. So if things come up, people don't have an opportunity to listen to those recordings or find out what happened in court unless they were actually here. Did I cover that?
You did.
More, please.
The long version of that is any court that in Oregon that is not a court of record, which are only municipal courts and justice courts, any case that is appealed goes to, in our case, it would go to Washington County, so it goes to the county circuit court in which the municipal or justice court sits, and they have a brand new trial as if the first trial never happened. So they have a new trial on the facts. This way, it goes to the Court of Appeals, where they mostly look for errors of law or errors in procedure, and that's the way that I, as a municipal court judge, would learn that I was doing something incorrect. I would get that feedback from the Court of Appeals. As Holly said, I think it's the transparency issue that is most important. We don't have a lot of appeals, thankfully, but it's along the same lines as police officers wearing body cameras. It just holds us all a little bit more accountable. And then one of the reasons that municipal courts and justice courts exist is to take some of the load off of the circuit courts, and I'm sure everybody's aware of how incredibly busy the circuit court is, and if they're just hearing traffic court trials again because somebody didn't like the outcome in this court, we're not satisfying that part of our goal mission.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's very interesting how, to your point, it sort of changes the flow of the appeal process if someone is concerned about what happens here. So that's a very nice or interesting clarification. I appreciate that.
Council President Hu.
Thank you, Mayor. And as a lawyer, I'm quite impressed that Councilor Schlack deep into going to ORS. And so, yeah, as a lawyer, the note I put down in preparation of the meeting is many things that Holly already mentioned: transparency, accountability, trust in our court system, and legal protection for both the defendant and the city. So I'm 100% behind this. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Council President.
The only thing I want to highlight is in the ordinance, September 16th is the go live date. So, and looking at your face, just confirming that's what's in the ordinance. So anything before there, not a court of record. Any cases heard after that, court of record. So for anyone who's asking or may wonder when that switch occurs, September 16th.
September 16th, and if a case is filed on September 15th, it's still not a court of record. It's got to be cases filed midnight on the 16th and forward.
All right. Any additional questions or consideration or motion on ordinance number 24-09?
Happy to make a motion, Mayor. I move to approve ordinance number 24-09.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Will the city recorder read the number and title of the ordinance?
Ordinance number 24-09, an ordinance designating the Tigard Municipal Court a court of record.
Thank you. Will the city recorder conduct a roll call vote, starting with Youth Councilor Minany?
Youth Councilor Manini,
Aye.
Councilor Wolf,
Yes.
Council President Hu,
Yes.
Mayor Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw,
Yes.
Councilor Schlack.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. The ordinance is passed by unanimous vote of the council present and online, still present. Thank you so much for being here. And this is exciting. We've been talking about this for a long time, so it's a great next step. Thank you both for all of your research and everything you did to make this project happen, this change.
Thank you. And thanks to City Attorney Rahala for all of her help in drafting the ordinance and making sure I was on track.
Next item on our agenda is review and discuss community feedback on the July 4th drone show, and we have Communications Manager Wyatt to present this item. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Kent Wyatt, Communications Manager. Here to talk about the community feedback that we received on the drone show. And first, and I know you guys had a proclamation a few weeks ago honoring Ron Royce and the work that he's done, but would echo his ability to pull this off along with this year, Cindy Murphy and Digital Communications Coordinator Leandro Barrentos was instrumental in the day of the show. Especially appreciative of that in looking around, some other cities did drone shows this past year. City of SeaTac did a drone show, their first ever, and they lost 55 drones out of the 200. So we're here tonight not to talk about losing drones. It's really kind of on the edges of some of the things that we heard in our survey. And I think you'll notice a couple of themes throughout the feedback. One of them just being the logistics of the show. And then we'll share a little bit of the community comments that were received throughout. But as a reminder, kind of why I'm here, when council made the decision last February to move from a fireworks show to a drone show, I think one of the things that each of you communicated was the need to measure how the community feels about this effort. At the end of the day, did this work for them? What was their experience? So to do that, we had a brief survey that we offered folks the night of and for a couple weeks leading after that. Next slide. So my presentation today will center around three kind of pillars, just the how we shared the survey. I think we're always interested in hearing from our community members, in particular community members who actually attended the show. What we heard from those folks, and then other community feedback. And just a reminder, and I don't think you guys need to know this, I mean, obviously the survey is important. It's not scientifically significant, but it is important in those voices. But I know each and every one of you probably heard from community members about what they enjoyed, what they didn't. So obviously that's also a big part of that conversation in how we move forward. We focused on 4 main questions. I'll give you a brief overview of what we heard from each of those questions tonight. The 2 themes, overall themes, one is the drone show itself, so the length of the show, the music, those type of things, and then the logistics. Folks who were there, unfortunately, many of them dealt with some traffic issues on the way out, and some things that certainly could be adjusted in the future. Kind of a good problem to have. That large turnout of close to 10,000 people at a community event on 4th of July was really cool to see, but also led to some heartache for folks who are leaving the show. Next slide. So the results of the survey. So we did our best to hear from as many community voices as possible, 694 to be exact. 79% of those were from Tigard. Other areas that were represented, one of the questions on the survey was where do you live? Beaverton, Portland, Tualatin, Sherwood were a couple of more frequently mentioned locations on where people had come from. And then in terms of promoting the survey, luckily there was a lot of interest, as you guys may have heard, in this show, and the fact that it was really innovative and a unique approach to addressing some of the concerns that folks have around fireworks shows, whether that's their pets or veterans. And so a lot of curiosity about that. It was easy to get the word out. We had support from basically every TV station and some of the newspapers, including post-event. Tigard Times really pushed our survey out to the community and encouraged folks to fill that out. If you were at the event, there was an announcement at the end about a QR code you can scan and take the survey. You know, in hearing subsequent feedback, I think some of the audio there was one challenge. Not everybody necessarily heard that message, or it was clear that was available. So certainly understand that, and amped up our presence even more afterwards to capture those voices of folks who were there. Next slide. To get into the bulk of what we heard, what was your overall experience? How did you feel about the show? Some of the words that stuck out that really came through in some of the comments, and I'll give you a breakdown on themes of the comments, but at the end, as I mentioned, we had 694 survey responses. 500 of those folks took time to comment, which is a lot to go through, but really gleaned some important information. And some of it was really exciting to read. Words like amazing, cutting edge, enjoyed, family friendly were some of the positive sentiment that was shared around the drone show and folks' experience. On the less positive side, ones I referenced already, the logistics, parking, traffic management. I think another aspect of that too was some of the food and beverages and being able to access them. The lines were lengthy for some, and led to some heartache for folks who maybe were planning on eating and treating their family there that weren't able to do that. And then there was a theme and a number of questions about the length of the drone show. Folks thought it should be longer. One of the things we tried to do ahead of time, I was on the city website, give folks an idea of what to expect. At the same time, we know not everybody is necessarily going to head to the site and watch the video. We had some sample videos of what drone shows look like. And folks felt like 12 to 13 minutes, in some cases, was too short and would have liked to have seen it been a little bit longer. A couple people expressed they really wanted a big bang at the end. I guess there wasn't a big enough bang for them at the end, like a grand finale. So that was another thing that we had heard. On the next slide, we'll talk about the viewing experience. And I think some of this, we heard a lot of this before the show. A lot of questions about, hey, I live near Cook Park. I live near Summerfield. Can I still watch it from my deck? We had folks in Summerfield like, can we still bring the golf cart out and see it from hole number 8? And unfortunately, that really is not possible for the ideal viewing experience. 400 feet up in the air, music. Ideally, you needed to be on site, and I think that was frustrating for some in terms of their viewing experience. Some would still try to view it from the normal spot. Some tried to come on site, but the visibility and the comfort were a couple of things that came up in folks who were on site, along with music. There was some music that was accompanied the show. I think the sound quality and the volume was not as loud as it needed to be, especially for a crowd that size. But this is a logistical thing that in the future, if we choose to do that, these are things that can be adjusted, but certainly valuable feedback that we've heard in these survey questions. On the next slide, which is one I think is very interesting, just how did folks feel compared to the fireworks show that they may have previously attended? And I think it really was kind of a mixed bag, and some of it depend on your prior experience on if you had been to the fireworks show and experienced that. We had one person indicate, well, what about rotating between a drone show and a fireworks show? Could you do that in the future? And also that sentiment for folks who really enjoyed the drone show more of the environmentally friendly approach that this portrayed, and I think gave off as supporting kind of what the city is about when it comes to climate and environment, everything from lessening noise pollution and light pollution. So those were a few of the comments that we heard around, you know, how do you compare this to fireworks? People do have very strong opinions on these questions, which I think is part of why we elicited such a strong number of folks that we heard from in the community. Lastly, and on the next slide, I did want to break down just some of and it's hard to group. I think next slide, Eric. On the next slide that we have, there you go. What else should we know from your experience? So we tried to pull out some themes from 500 comments. What can those themes that we can glean? Some of those I've already shared with you that I think poked through. These are pretty much verbatim comments from folks who really felt the show was the way to go and enjoyed that experience and shared it. There was also kind of an underlying theme of just being really family friendly. Folks felt really welcome to bringing their kids. At the same time, some interest in having more activities for kids. That definitely would be an area I think that could be strengthened in the future if this is the direction that we go in keeping kids occupied, especially leading up to the show, is certainly important in keeping them on site. So those were just some of the positive comments that we got on the show. In terms of negative feedback, on the next slide, you'll see some feedback that we received. That the top one gets at the punch that somebody wanted. Like, what's that final punch? What was that grand finale that folks had? And then the last ones on there, you'll see those were covered, and probably ones that you've heard community members express an interest or maybe frustration in. Just some of the long lines. Traffic control was certainly an issue leaving the event, especially for folks who might have been less familiar with the community and how to get out of that lot. And then on the final slide, you'll see just kind of suggestions for improvement. So if the drone show is an approach that the city wants to continue, here are some of the things that folks would like to see. Desire for a longer show, visibility, comfort, we talked about, food and drink options, and then I think could be a lot more impactful too with a little bit more coordination between the drones and the music. People appreciated the Tigard-centric part of the drone show, but felt like there was a disconnect between the music that was happening to the drones that were actually being displayed. So wanted to come to you tonight to present just what we've heard, what we heard in that survey. We did collect email addresses from folks who filled out that survey and assured them that we would follow up based on kind of the direction that we decide to go into next year, just to let them know that their voices had been heard. I think anytime when somebody is willing to fill out pretty detailed comments on how they felt, important to circle back with them. So tonight wanted to present those results to you, and obviously welcome comments, feedback, themes that you heard from community members about their experience at the drone show this past year.
Thank you. I think it would be helpful to understand, are we looking to give guidance for the 2025 show? Are we just having a general discussion? What sort of specific information are you looking for?
My interest would be in hearing feedback that the council received about the drone, especially if there's areas for improvement that you heard that could be valuable in moving forward and thinking about the best approach for the community for the 4th of July event.
Okay, got it. Thank you. I just have one quick question on the survey. Were people asked a question, did you attend like in the area? Were you in the surrounding area? Did you not attend? Was that question ever asked on the survey?
The only question was whether you attended, but
Okay.
not were you in Cook Park or were you in Summerfield. It was just a general, did you attend?
And do you have a breakdown of how many people said yes, they attended, or no, they didn't attend? And did you separate out those answers so we know from the people who were there what their responses were?
Yeah, we did separate out the answers from the folks who were there. We're also, in some of the comments, if you look through it, some of them will say, hey, I didn't attend, but here are my
Suggestions?
thoughts. Yeah, here are my suggestions, even
Okay.
though I didn't attend the event.
Excellent. Okay. Those are my initial, I have other questions, but Youth Counselor, do you mind any? Do you have any questions or comments? Did you attend the show? Yeah. It was late. I had to keep my toddler up. Yeah, Counselor Shaw?
Great, thank you very much for the report. As we mentioned, there was National Nights Out last week, so it was an opportunity to hear a lot of feedback about the drone show for those who had attended. There was a couple of suggestions that there be a golf cart pathway from Summerfield to the high school, so therefore those individuals could attend, so that was a request. I promised to forward that. And with regards to traffic, we did hear that there was some issues with folks getting out, so perhaps we can even do next year, should this be the choice, maybe e-bikes or e-scooters with helmets, safety speeds, but that could be another alternative just to get people out of cars, since that's some to bogged folks down. The other one I got was also about more children, kid-friendly activities, and then just matching the sound.
Yes.
So those were the comments.
And I think we heard from the chief in his July report, or maybe just a one-on-one conversation we had, that that was double the amount of people that we were expecting. And so planning in the future for appropriate porta potties and more food things, and quite honestly, shutting that road down and having everybody go out versus lanes of traffic. I think some of the complaints that we have are absolutely valid and totally solvable to make it a much more pleasant experience. We just were not prepared for the popularity. So, yeah. Counselor Wolf. Counselor, we can't hear you.
Sorry, it's been a while since I've been remote. Thank you, Mayor. Kent, thanks for the presentation, and I appreciated the feedback that was shared, Councilor Shaw's added comments. I don't know that I would have anything unique that wasn't represented. The comments I wanted to make is I feel like there's a disconnect in the survey feedback where how was your viewing experience, how was your overall experience, and the majority to me is positive, and then it was drone compared to fireworks, and almost 60% said worse or much worse. So it's a bit of a head scratcher to me to see kind of that gap. So I'm just curious about this, and Ken, I don't know that there's an answer to it, but I just felt it was a disconnect of those that felt like it was a good experience, but really missed the fireworks. The one feedback of how we could improve, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to come back and have a deeper conversation of all those components that would make it a more successful event. But my understanding on the length of time was a battery issue or something like that. So that is kind of that value dollar question that I'll be curious about is in 25, if we look at this, is what it is, this is what it costs, and this is really what the drones can provide, and there's not like we could pay an increment for 5 minutes. So I guess and I know, Mayor, I appreciate you clarifying what's the purpose for tonight, but that is something that I would really like to understand, along with kind of a plan of what this event could look like in the future. And I like I said, I don't really have additional feedback that's different that's already been shared, but I wanted to give my thoughts. So thank you, Mayor.
Council President Hu?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ken, for your presentation. I also have the same question as Mayor about whether, the question of whether that person was there was asked, and you say yes, and you say you separate it out. But I want to follow up because I wasn't clear. So the answer given here, like, for example, how was your viewing experience? 63% excellent. Those are from the people who were actually there, or is from everybody?
They indicated that they were there.
Okay, so, okay.
I mean, the challenge with this is there's no way to tell that they were there. I mean, it's a self-selecting.
I know, yeah, it is, as you say, it's not scientifically significant or statistically significant, whatever, valid.
Yes.
Yes, it's not scientific, so yeah, okay. And I also was scratching my head, like Councilor Wolf, about the different answer. So I guess, you know, is it reasonable to say that the reason why the answer to the first question of why was your overall experience is lower than the viewing experiences because they were counting together the lack of food option, the parking? Is that why it's lower than the viewing experience? The overall experience is not as good as the viewing experience? Is that?
Yeah, there was a lot of different elements to
Right.
that.
Okay.
And then I think on the fireworks, there's underlying, it's been tradition to have fireworks.
Right.
And I think it would have taken a lot to exceed that bar of like, yeah, this was better than fireworks, because we had a lot of comments about like this is what 4th of July is about.
Right.
It's about fireworks.
Right.
This is what we expected. So that I think is some of it. And then also going back to, you know, folks hopefully were honest and were there that completed this survey, but hard to capture like the ones that were solely there. And that's why I think it's important too, and hear from you guys tonight on like the feedback you have heard from the community, because those are probably the folks who were there and unfortunately experienced some of the traffic challenges or not being able to get food.
Yeah.
But like a number of you have mentioned, those are logistical issues that can be addressed fairly easily.
Yeah, and the negative feedback regarding the drone itself, I think they are fair, right? Because I agree that the endings could be more exciting. So, you know, that's there's room for improvement over there. So yeah.
Well, I think too, if you know they have the drone show, but also the leading up to the drone show,
Yeah.
there's more kids' activities, there's more things to
Yeah,
do.
that's right. There's like other activity, the band, and that's really important. And also just remind the public the funding comes from the hotel lodging tax, right? So
Correct.
So we have to use, I believe, 80% of it. Our finance director is here for tourism promotional activities. So yeah, so that's important to remind the public as well. So, but overall, I agree with the negative feedback about where it need to be improved. So yeah, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Councillor Schlack?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to just express gratitude to our community members, the nearly 700 that filled out this survey. You mentioned about 500 or so actually left comments. As a former committee chair, I always love community engagement, even if it comes in negative, because I just think it's great that people care enough that they want to give feedback and create a better product or service for our community. So I think that's great. Also, I'd like to say, you know, this being about 6 weeks on the job now, my first meeting was right after 4th of July. A lot of my family and friends were there as well, and they were quite surprised with how strong the contention is around fireworks in our community. And the way I look at this survey is it doesn't seem to me to be necessarily about fireworks versus drones. They seem to be both valid options. I think there's just a lot of concerns or areas of improvement just with the overall programming, like my colleagues have been saying, with more kids' activities, better transportation logistics, and so on, that can be addressed without even having to get to the topic of fireworks versus drones. One question I do have, though, you mentioned that there was a general complaint about the show being a bit shorter because of drones, and of course battery life and everything plays into that. I'm just curious for community members who are listening about how long would just a regular fireworks show then be by comparison, like twice as long or just
It's closer
20
to
minutes?
the 20, 25 minutes.
Okay.
I mean, we tried and obviously can continue to do better to educate folks about what to expect. Because that was a worry about expectations. Like it is slightly different, but clearly that message didn't get to everybody.
Sure. So 25 minutes for a fireworks show, and our show was about 10 to 15 minutes with drones. So
The
that's
drones.
the comparison, which in real terms isn't that much time, but in terms of an actual comparison, it's, significantly shorter than what we've done previously. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Additional comments? Councilor Shaw, you look like you want to say something.
Coming out of technology, I think it's really fascinating that we're having this discussion, but also there could be multiple more drones, which could lengthen the amount of time and kind of that pop and that ooh that you get at the end. And so, this is a question perhaps to be asked, just plant the seed and ask later, but is there opportunity for sponsorship so we can, if we were to double the amount of drones, we could reduce the cost or
So I'll say,
it's like the mayor's.
Yeah, no, I've had conversations with the city manager and sort of just having ideas about it, about possibly having a presenting sponsor or a partnership or those sorts of things. I think all of that is a possibility. And if we decide to continue with the drones, yes, something that we can continue to look into and start having a conversation probably earlier rather than later, looking for that kind of partnership. I will also say drones are new, right? Like this is only happening in more and more cities across the country, but the technology is evolving, and it's even possible by next year there could be better batteries, there could be the cost reduction because more cities are doing this. So I think there's lots of possibilities in the future too. But did you have anything to add?
No.
Yeah.
Mayor, if you don't mind. Thanks, Mayor. And thanks for those final comments there, because those are some of the things I wanted to share as well. The cost may change, battery life, those are some of the key things that will be reliable on. There is a sense of urgency in how we move forward, and I bring that up because as you recognized our event organizers a couple meetings ago, we have been under the mindset that we are going to assume responsibility for the event because 38 years of success, we don't feel it's appropriate to allow it just to not continue with either the fireworks or drones. I'll say we're also probably under the mindset that we would continue down the path with drones, though we will need make sure that the council agrees with that before we move forward. We will look at ways of improving, obviously, all the logistics and other ways of the show as well. The other piece of this, because the other 3 events that we started 3 years ago have also continued to grow in popularity, from our Juneteenth event to our Pride Parade and celebration to El Tigre, and now we've had another event just a couple weeks ago that once again had 1,000 people at. And so the team, Kent's involved with it, Nicole and others are going to come forward with a recommendation to me, and ultimately we'll come to the council on how we really can support these and make them sustainable into the future, because right now people are trying to put these large events on, and so we're looking at, is there some efficiencies in how we run these events. And so now 4th of July is being folded into that, and so we can come back with that report as well as then get the council to give us a little more further direction on drones or fireworks. And if I can share one other thing that you'll appreciate, so I was talking with one of the assistant city managers in Sunnyvale, California, and they did the same thing this year and had the exact same experience. They were planning for about 2,000 and were overwhelmed with 8,000 to 10,000. Their mayor, like you, saw the show in Columbus and had a conversation, I think, with their city manager and talked about, is this something we should do? And like we did, we agreed. And so pretty interesting that the exact same result happened in another city. They're doing the same thing, debriefing, and how do they make it better next year? So just as a side.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, when we stood there in Columbus, all of us just had our mouths open because I think most of us mayors hadn't experienced it. So it's great that I wasn't the only mayor to come back from that conference with ideas. The other thing that I did want to add is that we had public comments from a couple of individuals concerned about fireworks in general, and we've had follow-up emails from somebody requesting a fireworks task force. So I just kind of wanted to put the idea out there because this is just sort of along the same theme. And I think his concerns was addressing the noise that is happening in the city through illegal fireworks and what to do about it. So also keep that in the back of your mind, that has been a community member's request and something that we would probably need to kick off early next year in order to, I guess, have a purpose and be able to potentially make an impact if that's the way that we go. So something to think about as well, just because we have not discussed it. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Yeah. For the non-agenda items, just a conversation on sort of the two committees or task force that we had, I think, talked about in general, and whether or not we feel strongly that they should be moved forward outside of a more broad council or committee and board review. And one would be a committee or task force on houselessness, and the other would be a committee or task force on climate change or climate solutions. And so I don't think we have to have like, this is exactly what they're going to do, and this would be the duration and those sorts of things. I think it would be a conversation on if this is something that we want to direct our city teammates to sort of look into, or if you have specifics, you're also welcome to share that as well, that, you know, I think this committee should be tasked with this to help advise us or to make recommendations. So, and I know there's a little bit of overlap also because we have CHART, but CHART isn't a committee and there's no agenda or minutes or sort of thing. And so I feel like it's my personal opinion that it would need to be formalized if we want to kind of continue to move forward with that. Questions, comments? Oh, Councilor Wolf.
Push all my buttons here. Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, I'll just briefly, I appreciate you bringing up CHART because I do think that that is a technical committee that serves staff, but now as a council goal that's been in place for a good year, I advocate for both to have some process around them to continue. So I'll circle back. I'll go to climate. As we all know, walking through the budget process, we completed the climate action report. That was really, a lot of that work was before my time coming on to council, but I think there's funding set there. I think there is a clear drive and interest on how the city can continue to improve and expand the climate action work that we're doing. I don't know if, given that, if it's better that that's a model that's similar to what PSAB was, right, where it really is kind of leveraging that action report information, looking at those resources, what the city's already accomplished, or, you know, within our council goals and how we proceed forward. So I just think there's a tremendous energy around there, and I've had clearly community members step up to say, gosh, we'd love to do that. We have the climate action team as well. So that's my idea there. And with the houselessness, again, I do feel that CHART serves a really important technical purpose for staff, but I would like to see from a council lens that we have guidance from our community. And I also don't know if a starting point is for council to have a work session with CHART or the Committee for Community Engagement. And it is, what is our purpose? What are we wanting to accomplish? We have done a lot. Kim has been an amazing leader for our city in supporting those who need shelter and those to keep them housed. So I am interested in both. They might take different paths, but thank you for this opportunity to have a conversation during council. And that's it.
Thank you. Council President Hu?
Thank you, Mayor Loop. I guess I'll start with the climate change committee or task force. I think my personal feeling since I've been on the council is that that's the one area of council goal that's perhaps we could do more about, and or maybe being educated about more on. So, but I also I'm also aware that for climate change, there's so much we can do, right? So I would like to see if we do have this task force or committee, we give them specific tasks, you know, what we want them to accomplish. So what does the council want from them? So that's the only request I have. For houseless task force or committee, I definitely think it will be very helpful. Unlike Councilor Wolf, I may not necessarily want direction from them, but when I was doing research on what a city could do for houseless, one of the things that popped up to me is public awareness and education, because it's important to educate the public on what the city is doing and what is the city is in with other partners and stuff like that. And it took me a while to gather everything with what we're doing, to make a list. So, the reason we want to educate the public is just I think it's important to reduce stigma of houseless population, and just so we can encourage supportive attitude. So in that sense, I think having this task force, one important thing we can ask them to do is to be sort of an ambassador to the community, because you mayor and the council member, we're out there meeting with the public, educate them on what we are doing, but there's just so much we could do. So it doesn't hurt to have more ambassadors who are educated on what we're doing and help us spread the word. So for that perspective, for that task, I think it's worth having a homeless task force or a committee.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it gets complicated because there's so many layers of government working on it, and we're all working together, but I don't think we do the greatest storytelling and communication on everything that we have going on and all the different ways we're trying to tackle it. Youth Councilor Mainany?
Specifically for the Houseless Committee, I agree. It would be really great to have that sort of community outreach for that. And I was also wondering if they could do the research of looking at what other cities have done for their houseless population and doing historical research and stuff, and just presenting those, not necessarily promoting or rejecting any of the ideas, but simply presenting them so we have more background knowledge.
Councilor Schlock?
Thank you, Mayor Lube. I would like to I share Councilor President Hu's interest in raising public awareness and creating opportunities for public feedback, especially on council goals. I feel like as a city councilor, I would always support any opportunity for that. That said, I personally would not be supportive of forming standing committees on these two topics. I think a task force route would be better, where it's focused on creating a strategic plan or a report to the council for consideration on further action. I generally, when I hear new proposals, I always start from a point of skepticism. So I'm not a full yes on the task force, but I'm not opposed to further discussions about what those would look like and what they would be focused on. I just ask that they be for a limited duration, and they focus on preparing a report, sort of like PSAB, sort of like the Charter Review Committee and so on. They have a specific deliverable that they would be focused on providing the city. I also think it's important to keep in mind that climate change and houselessness are very important council goals for 2023 to the start of 2025. We're about to have an election with a new council. So I think it's important to be mindful that the council goals may shift slightly in those areas, and perhaps that these may not be the right structural entities that we want to form to address these concerns based on the electoral feedback we get from our constituents. So those are my concerns, but I don't have any strong objections to proceeding with getting a proposal on how to proceed on this.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. The only thing I would say is I think they're council goals because they're such prominent issues in the community, and even if the council turns over, those issues aren't going to go away. And so I understand your argument, but I would also say that they're extremely challenging things that year over year, regardless of the council, that it's something that will be facing the city.
Yeah, I totally share those viewpoints. My concerns are more on the sort of bureaucratic and practical side of, are these the right vehicles for achieving the goals that we want? I totally agree with your assessment of those particular issues facing our community, though, and I wanted to be very clear for the record on that.
Councilor Shaw?
Thank you, Councilor Slack and Mayor. Just want to remind folks that we do have a climate action report, and it has a robust 16 actions, which includes, I think, at least 12 actions within those actions itself, so something like 70. So I think we have a report that could serve a climate task force, and I would probably concur with Councilor Slack. I think a task force would be more suited. I'm also hearing finance and the city manager in my ear saying total Tyler, and that the focus needs to continue to get that across the finish line. So as much as I would hate to divert some of the staff time, if it would, to these two task force, though I do think they're key, important issues for the city. So I'm supportive of both. I'm a little concerned about the houselessness, just because part of the reason CHART was established, because there were so many different committees and task force and entities doing houselessness, that I think our community strategic manager, Kim Zell, really did a great job on pulling them all together so they can look at not duplicating resources and ensuring that dollars are spent appropriately. So I just want to make sure that if we set up kind of a houselessness task force, it works in tandem with that and doesn't add yet another layer where we're delaying needed resources or dollars. So with that, thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Wolf?
Sorry about that delay. So I guess, going first, I just wanted to kind of circle back to a couple of thoughts. So on climate, I agree, Councilor Shaw, with the report, and I actually started with that. What I would say, though, is we have an excellent report. I think we've done a lot of those specifics that were listed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that there was funding there. So what I look at to Council President Hu's point of a task force and its purpose is to help us have direction, right? I mean, the city's doing an amazing job, unless Steve feels otherwise that this doesn't bring value. But I also agree with being very mindful, as Councilor Shaw and Councilor Schlack have brought forward on the purpose of a committee. But I'll be really blunt that so much of my time around working with the community, engaging them and giving them an opportunity to connect, I feel really passionate about that. And I think that climate will always be a priority, or it should be, in my opinion, as well as how we navigate houselessness. So I do not support creating committees for the sake of having more committees that aren't creating a specific objective in mind. But I feel that having engagement, and like I had recommended with houselessness, whether that's the Committee for Community Engagement that is established, that is a group, and CHART and Council working together with how we move forward. How do we engage? How do we communicate? We've heard public comment over and over again about kind of the same pieces. So how do we address that? So I just, clearly I'm a little fired up about this, and I think it's an opportunity to engage our community members that have tremendous passion around these two issues, and to do it well and with purpose and with clear objectives. So thank you, Mayor.
And absolutely agree with you, Councilor Wolf. I wasn't suggesting that we not have a climate task force or a climate committee. It was just I would hate for a whole nother report to be produced when we already currently have one that has so many objectives. So that was just for clarity if I was unclear there. Thank you.
Do you feel like there's clear direction, City Manager Reimer?
So what I'm hearing is an interest in having us look at both of these, coming back with some thoughts on the purpose, the value that they bring forward. Second piece is we're scheduled, I think it's September 17th meeting for our goal update. And so obviously both of these are going to be discussed. And so if the council's good with that, I think we could incorporate some of this into that presentation to give us a little time to think through it and then share those thoughts with all of you. In the meantime, if you have other thoughts during our one-on-ones, I know Lindsay Washburn maybe reaching out as well from a climate standpoint to introduce herself to you and some to you again, and just to talk about your priorities for the climate. So I think we have some pieces here that we can build off of and then return at that September meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the robust discussion. We don't have an executive session this evening, and so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn, Mayor.
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.